Empire was the longest lasting empire of the history of man. This story begins in 580 BC with the birth of Cyrus the Great. This motif is about a boy who is unwanted, saved from death by wolves, who returns to claim what is his. Motif is the same as Moses, Sargon of Akkad, and Romulus and Remus. Astyages was king who had a daughter, Mandain. Cyrus had two dreams about her, one that she urinated in enormous quantities such that it filled his city, Persepolis, and flooded Asia, the other that vines grew from her private parts and spread over Asia. The advisors to the king, the Magi, said that her son would usurp his throne as she was currently pregnant. Astyages called for Harpagus, whom he trusted more than anyone, and says, quote, "I have some instructions for you, Harpagus, and mind you pay attention to them, whatever they may be. My safety depends on you. If you neglect it and prefer to serve others, the day will come when you will be caught in your own trap. Get hold of Mandain's child, take it home and kill it, then bury it how you please." Harpagus couldn't do it. Having received the kid and sent a messenger to one of the king's herdsmen, Mithridates, his wife Sino, or bitch, Sino Greek for bitch, Persian form being spaka for bitch. The foothills where Mithridates' pastures was in the north, high, mountainous, and wooded. Rest of Persia is flat. Harpagus said to him upon meeting that the king's orders are to kill the boy among the hills, and if not, you will be put to death. Mithridates picked up the kid and returned the way he came. His wife fell in love with the boy and pleaded for him not to kill him. He said that he had no choice in the matter as Harpagus was going to come and check. His wife said that her own child was born today and it was born dead, that they will have managed pretty well for themselves if their baby was to get a royal burial and this one was not to be killed. Harpagus agreed with this and swapped the kids. Harpagus obtained the proof he wanted through trusty members of his guard. The herdsman's wife raised the boy, who would become Cyrus, though she of course did not call him by this name. When the boy was 10 years old, his identity was revealed. He and some other boys were playing the game Kings in the streets of the village. Cyrus was the one who the boys picked as the king. The local official's son refused what King Cyrus commanded, and Cyrus ordered his arrest. The other boys accordingly seized him, and the Cyrus beat him savagely with a whip. The official went to Astyages and asked how it was right for the son of a slave to treat his son like this. For the sake of the official's rank, he sent for the herdsman and his son. When Astyages asked Cyrus about his outrageous manner, Cyrus replied in an articulate manner. Even before he was done talking, Astyages had guessed who he was. Astyages got alone with the herdsman and asked him about his son. The herdsman lied, and Astyages was going to have him tortured when he revealed who his true identity was. Astyages held a dinner to celebrate the deliverance of his grandson. He would have a sacrifice to the gods to whom such a right belongs. Dishes of mutton were served to everyone except Harpagus. Harpagus was served the flesh of his son, all of it, except the head, the hands, and the feet, which had been put on a platter and covered with a lid. When Harpagus had eaten as much as he'd wanted, Astyages asked him if he'd enjoyed his dinner. He said he liked it, whereupon whose business it was brought in the boy's head, hands, and feet in the covered dish. Harpagus removed the lid and saw the fragments of his son's body. He kept control of himself, took the remains, and went home. Herodotus says that this was supposed to be so that he could bury it all together, and that this was how Harpagus was punished. Cyrus was dismissed and went to his parents' palace, described how he was raised by the herdsman's wife, and gave her a lot of praise. His parents made a legend out of it, saying that a bitch had found him in the mountains and suckled him. This is the origin of the well-known tale. The dog is sacred to the Persians, and it may represent here divine protection. Cyrus rallied the tribes of Persia to revolt, to fling off the yoke of Astyages. Cyrus beat Astyages, but treated him with great consideration and kept him at his court till he died. He would then go on to beat the Lydian king Croesus, a victory which would give him control over the whole nation. This story starts in 422 BC, in the 9th year of the war between Imperial Athens and the Peloponnesian League. 100 Athenian ships were on their way to help their allies in Sicily. A storm happened and they decided to go to Pylos. Pylos is 45 minutes from Sparta, had lots of stone and timber, and had a harbor nearby. Most of the place would make a natural stronghold in order to do a lot of damage to the Spartans. The Spartans were having a festival which they were celebrating and did not take the news of the occupation seriously. Their army was also raiding around Athens, which played a part in keeping them back. When the Spartan king, Aeges, heard of the capture of Pylos, headed back immediately, considering a threat to their vital interests. Sparta and nearby towns got ready to march on Pylos. The Spartan and Athenian fleets were on their way too. The Spartans came up with the idea to garrison the island of Spactria with 420 hoplites and helots. The island is 1.5 miles long and a stone's throw away from Pylos itself. The Spartans did this to pinch the Athenians in and to take hold of the harbor. The Athenian Demosthenes made a rallying speech to get ready for the land and sea assault. With the Spartans coming into action, it was Brasidas who distinguished himself the most. He was the captain of one of the triremes, who was like Dawn. Before this, he would sail around and get cities, nations to side with the Peloponnese just from charisma alone. He was called the most Athenian Spartan. There wasn't enough room to land the ships at Pylos. Brasidas spurred them on from their fear of damaging the ships so that they could overwhelm the defenders. The attack stalled because of the bulwark Athenians. The Athenians then noticed that the island was occupied and set their ships out and isolated the island. The fighting continued, but after a bitter struggle, the action was broken off. Talks were had, but in the end, the Athenians got more ships from Athens to blockade the island, while the Peloponnese were in camp on the mainland, keeping a lookout for the island. This came down to many people taking risks to supply the island, especially the helots. Large rewards were promised, such as money and freedom to any helot who succeeded in bringing food in. The two sides now did everything they could think of for importing and preventing provisions. One of the soldiers on the island, because of a lack of space, accidentally set fire to the wood while cooking a meal, and the whole wood burnt down. This made it easier for the Athenians who were getting ready, who embarked 800 hoplites altogether the next day. The Spartans were caught with their pants down and could not press the pursuit in their heavy armor against the light and harassing troops. Spartans were thrown into consternation from the dust that rose from the ashes. The many projectiles loosed from the shouting ended up surrendering. Every Hellen thought that the Spartans went to the last man. And so when an Athenian ally asked one of the Spartan prisoners if he was a real Spartan, he replied, quote, "Spindles, by which they mean arrows, would be worth a great deal if they could pick brave men from cowards. This is saying how the ones who died simply got in the way of the stones and arrows, and he was alive by chance. Pylos was firmly garrisoned and used surrounding allies to raid into Laconia. This story exemplifies Greek confrontation with material necessity and a yearning for immortality. When we look at what Greekness is, we discover the greatness of the Greeks is in them starting politics as such, a discovery born from their response to material necessities that characterize human life and whose principal component is the greater good. These first things would be comprised of things such as fear and greed and compromise. Thucydides' intent is turning to the causes of the war between the two poles of Greek power, Athens and Sparta, is an attempt to make sense of the paradoxical insight that the birthplace of politics and common good also give rise to a war that destroys both. How could this be allowed when justice is at the center of Greek life? The answer is Thucydides' broader theoretical interests in religion and the human soul required his peculiar presentation of practical politics, because such a presentation articulates these pre-theoretical experiences necessary for theorizing about the first things in politics. Justice is the attention to the serving others and common good. Started with Sparta, where everyone chose to dress in the same measured way. Power is the ability to do what you want, when you want, at the expense of others. Core of Spartan power is the unstated and intangible devotion of the Spartans to their regime and to the freedom of their fellow Greeks. Thucydides invites us to connect the truth about Sparta's power to Sparta's justice to questions about first things and divine right. That connection can be stated simply: to know the character of justice as expressed in a given regime, one must know the truth about its source, which means one must possess knowledge of the first things. With Athenian imperialism seen as the product of yearning for immortality, we namely see that justice, which defines Greek life, can also and at the same time be injustice. Better known as the March of 10,000, this tale follows 10,000 mercenaries who marched into the heart of the Persian Empire. Hired by Cyrus the Younger to fight a dynastic struggle against his brother Artaxerxes for their father Darius II's throne. The story is about their 2-year march home, harassed by assassins, satraps, starvation, and blistering winters near the end, an adventure to rival the Odyssey itself. Full account from Xenophon, who was there, took on the leadership role and facilitated its success, being called the greatest general before Alexander the Great. Story starts with Cyrus the Younger being accused of plotting against the throne by satrap Tissaphernes. Cyrus went back to his satrapy and with no doubt about it started plotting to take the throne. He acquired a big army after promising to go to war with Tissaphernes, who was constantly raiding Greek lands. Unaware that they would really be fighting Artaxerxes and the Persian army, they force-marched through Syria, Arabia, and Babylon, being promised riches along the way. Battle of Cunaxa happens in 400 BC, 70 miles north of Babylon. Modern estimates say it was 15,000 under Cyrus and 40,000 under Artaxerxes. Bloody battle, but not for the Greeks, who apparently didn't lose a man, but was a draw as Cyrus was struck with a javelin beneath the eye, killing him. It was this standoff at dawn, where the Greeks were looking at Artaxerxes, knowing that they could kill him, but the Persians knowing that they didn't have the provisions to do so. Xenophon steps into the leadership role, and among the men is given command on this epic journey back to Greece. No sooner was the force in retreat when their rearguard was being attacked by the Persians. Xenophon pioneered rearguard action. Greeks did so well that Tissaphernes resolved to lead the force against them. The Greeks and their pursuers journeyed on, fighting constantly, the former stealing from villages they passed through. The Persians started using scorched earth tactics in this game of cat and mouse. They managed to escape northwards, where they escaped Persian persecution. However, this was replaced with being harassed by the modern-day Kurds and Armenians. They were trudging through 6 feet deep of snow and were running low on supplies. When they came upon a fortress, the leaders decided to conquer it for its provisions. They took the fortress, but once inside, quote, "And here a terrible spectacle displayed itself. The women first cast their infants down the cliff, and then cast themselves after their fallen little ones. The men likewise. In such a scene, Aeneas, the Stymphalion, an officer, caught sight of a man with a fine dress, about to throw himself over, and seized hold of him to stop him. But the other caught him in his arms, and both were gone in an instant, headlong down the crags, and were killed. Out of this place, the merest handful of human beings were taken prisoner, but cattle, asses in abundance, and flocks of sheep. They reached the mountain Theches. Xenophon, hearing a great cry, galloped to the front. Talita, Talita, the sea, the sea. Joy spread through the Greek ranks like wildfire, who fell to embracing each other in tears. This means that they were a week away from Trapezus. Again, dealing with more hostile natives, they drew up battle lines, which would allow them to fight and keep moving forward until finally they broke free of the enemy and reached Trapezus. Once at Trapezus, they reached out for a fleet to get them back to Hellas. They organized foraging parties and pillaging parties. They also convinced neighboring cities to build roads through the more impassable terrain so that they could move about more easily. They convinced them through a little intimidation, capitalizing on the locals of their mighty force and promising that if the roads were built, they would be gone sooner. Xenophon took half his force and conquered the Drille and took its spoils. When Xenophon returned, there was still no fleet. He took the sick and elderly and shipped them back to Hellas on what ships they could, while the rest marched to Croesus. The next few weeks saw much of the same before finally reaching Hellas. Xenophon ended up settling down in Urchaea. Thank you all for watching.